What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the beginning of the week, gang. Monday show. Getting us started nice and easy today. Middle of the afternoon kind of a start. We've got a 6:40, I want to say, lock time. We'll make that in plenty of time. There's only 5 games on the slate today. Yeah, 6:40 lock on both sites. Little 5-gamer today to start things off. Really ugly slate. Free pitching Monday. Outside of Mr. Chris Sale up at the top of the board, and then some guys we could go back and forth about a little bit as far as quality goes. It is an ugly pitching board. A lot of really cheap options, some interesting bats, obviously, given some really bad pitching on the slate. So a lot of things to talk about, but let's say hi. Anthony Taylor's here. Andy Melman's here. What's going on, guys? Good to see you. This is like the first I've been speaking out loud today. It's weird sometimes when you're just with the pets, you know, wake up, sit down, turn on the tube. I was listening to a podcast earlier. Just like called the dog inside, told them it was time to eat when I woke up at first. Said a couple things to the pets like throughout the day, but really have not been speaking out loud much, just getting the voice going. G Money the Don is here. Good afternoon, fella. Good to see you. Little lofty fella snuck in there. Good old Laffy. Wonder what he's up to. Good dude. Lone Wolf's here. What's going on, Lone Wolf? Good to see everybody trickling in. All right, we're up to a good number now. Took a second. Wanted to give everybody a minute. We'll dive on in. Like I was saying, really ugly kind of a pitching slate. Just to jump over to it. You've got one dominant option up at the top of the board in not the easiest matchup on the slate, facing the Diamondbacks, but obviously Chris Sale, super high end as compared to every other option on the board. A very up and down version of John Gray, but a guy who can absolutely go out and get it at a very affordable price, $7,300 on FanDuel, $7,000 on DraftKings. Mixed bag of options going down the board. Abbott in a very good matchup, but a bad ballpark, and he's kind of up and down for quality in some ways. So again, really interesting one. A couple of these lineups are confirmed already. If Lone Wolf, I was going to put it that way when we get into the actual pitching breakdown. It kind of is in a lot of ways on DraftKings, just like a mix of who you're playing at SP2 alongside Chris Sale. I expect he's going to be absurdly popular on that slate. He's very difficult to reach on FanDuel unless you're going to, a large stack of some of the cheapo teams, which is definitely a viable way to do it. And some of them could come through, and we're going to get into that. But he's more difficult to reach, I feel like, on FanDuel, where it's just like kind of straight line on DraftKings with all the values. But I'm sure, the pricing combinations on DK will also be somewhat prohibitive. But yeah, wouldn't be a crazy option in my mind, depending on how many lineups. Like if you wanted to, if you're building like 20 and you just wanted to throw them into at least 16, 18 of them, I don't think it's necessarily a mistake. And then it's just a matter of how you like to play as to whether or not you carve out a little bit more room and different combinations underneath that and then use them, less and less. But it's at least a starting point in a construction. But he's going to be massively popular. Swerving away from him, certainly, a way to go. Doesn't work out with him all that frequently. He is very good. But at the top of the board, we've got the Guardians and the Tigers. 8.5 run total in that one last time I checked. We've got Cater Montero going for the Tigers and Gavin Williams in his second start back. First one didn't go great, didn't pitch all that efficiently. He is very good, but he's really just rounding back into form. He made some rehab starts and kind of a clunker in the last one, like I said, against the White Sox of all teams. A little bit tougher of a Tigers team here, and I don't know that we go beyond 5 innings. He went 4 in that last one, but he did face 21 hitters, but that only took up like 70-something pitches. So, somewhere in between, that feels like a 5-inning start to me. But on a limited board, he could find some upside, strikeouts-wise anyway. Next one up, in Cincinnati, ugly Colorado team carrying a 4.04 implied total against the second highest second most expensive pitcher on both sites, Andrew Abbott. Not a favorable ballpark. You can see a 9-run total in that one. Cincinnati heavy favorites. They're at a 5.07 implied total. They look terrific against Ryan Feltner. But the Rockies are a little bit more frisky these days. They've got some interesting right-handed power bats in that lineup now. I'm sure we're going to get a lineup that includes like Michael Toglia, Hunter Goodman. We'll see whether Jones gets in there against the lefty. But it's a much more interesting Rockies lineup now that can put together some runs or at least some power, especially in that park. So that's one angle into cheap bats on the slate. I don't fully trust Abbott in a lot of ways. He can be very, very good, but he can also be pretty middle of the road. So he's obviously going to be involved in our lives, but not full faith there, especially with the Rockies, and I think Vegas is agreeing with the Rockies up above 4. The Twins and the White Sox. White Sox throwing Chris Flexen against a pretty good Twin squad that is leading the slate at 5.49 implied runs. I think they came in second fantasy points-wise when I did the rankings, but it hardly matters. They look absolutely fantastic. And then on the other side, a 4.12 implied total for that low-end White Sox team against Chris Paddock. He's making his first start back since June 21st. I think we're going to be pretty limited in innings there as well. The Rangers at the Angels. That's another one where we get John Gray at those very effective prices. It's just a matter of which version of John Gray we get. We've gotten a lot of limited strikeout performances from him. He's been up and down for runs allowed, which somewhat is in some cases is his fault, in some cases not. But it's a very gettable Angels lineup that should have a lot of right-handed hitters in it for him to feast on. He's pretty good against righties, so there's upside there. It's just do we get that day? Do we dip down for the value, or do we just try and pay for Chris Sale up at the top? But I do think that, on talent, on projection, John Gray is the correct number 2 on this slate, especially in the matchup. 3.95 implied total for the Angels. And then coming back the other way, we've got Davis Daniel, who one good, one bad so far. Good one against the Tigers. Mediocre one against the Athletics in his last start. So we'll see what we get, but a threatening enough Rangers lineup on the other side at a 4.64 implied total. And then the last game up, we have Sale, obvious, at the top of the board, going up against the Diamondbacks. He's got them checked down at just a 3.42 implied total. But then on the other side of that one, we've got an interesting young pitcher making his debut, Yulber Diaz. He'll be getting a start against what has been a very gettable Braves team. We'll give him a look. I've got all the numbers pulled, the minor league game log, the minor league stats. He's 23. He's only thrown 22 innings. It all came this year in 4 starts above Double-A. 11 starts in Double-A this year. Only 3 starts in Double-A last year. Made 22 starts at High-A. So we're talking about very limited high-end experience for this kid. Kind of accelerated promotion. Just filling a spot tonight and probably going back down to the minors after he makes the start, regardless of how it goes, or at least per reporting anyway. But an interesting enough option against a Braves team that is drawing a 4.67 implied total that does have a ton of power and a ton of power showing on this slate. But the kid's got some strikeout stuff. It's on the board. Take a peek at him over here. Not at the bottom of the board either. 6,500 on the FanDuel slate. A reasonable median with, I think, a little bit of additional upside. Especially considering, he went 6 innings in each of his last 2 minor league starts. Has a 7-inning start on the board, a few more 6-inning and 6+ quality starts in the through the minors. Supposed to be a high-end prospect, one of their better pitching prospects. And again, that Braves team has been gettable. So a lot of believability there. And I think a reasonable enough cut line. I'm kind of targeting Kader Montero with some Guardians bats, although he's at 4,000 on the DraftKings slate, so we're going to have a conversation about that. I don't really like the guys at the bottom of the board, Flexen and Feltner. So I do think there's believable upside in Yulber Diaz in his debut. Sale, as I was saying before, just easily the top of the board, even against a reasonably good Diamondbacks lineup with some quality bats in it. There's just no way you avoid Chris Sale being the top projected guy on this slate, being the most appealing option. 10.5 on DK is expensive. 11.5 on FanDuel is very expensive. But I think he's worth reaching for. And obviously on DK, when you're just pairing with value, every other guy on the board is at least at a reasonable enough value price. It's very easy to reach it. Here, it's a lot more difficult to reach, I think. I don't think that's going to impact the ownership all that much, by the way. I think, 40, 40+% anyway on FanDuel is probably realistic. That was a guess. Let me see where we're at on. We'll just see. I'll tell you whether we're above or below 40 on the projections on that site that I look at. They're. I don't want to give it away, but they're less than a point below 40, but they are below. That's funny. What a guess. It's almost like I know what I'm doing. On DraftKings, he's pushing like, a lot more. Put another quarter on top of that, and we're about there. So massive ownership for him. The obvious guys are, look like they're projected out to be the highest owned. It's kind of straightforward. No surprises there. Anthony Taylor, what's going on? Yeah, hit that like button. Kenneth Woodhouse, what's going on? Or K-Woo, I guess I could call you if we're abbreviating one another's names. Mama says, looks like the whole squad's in the building. Welcome, Mama. Good to see you, buddy. Lone Wolf saying, don't leave Doyle out of your Colorado stacks. I'll grab that lineup in a minute when we get there. But, love Brenton Doyle and what he's been doing out there. Another quality bat. He was one of the more straightforward ones. I'm looking for some of that cheap right-handed power as well that I mentioned. But Tovar's definitely in the mix. There's a lot of good bats in that lineup right now. So, kind of interesting approach. Fanatics here. Hope y'all had a good 4th of July, America. I hope everybody had a good 4th of July as well. Hope regardless of our big national divide that we can all at least unite around the concept of Shark Week this week, if nothing else. All-Star break next week, by the way. We're going to run into that, so we'll be off for a few days next week, but hopefully we can find some shit to do. I assume there's slates for the All-Star game, so we'll jump into that. Maybe we could talk some home run derby. No model for the home run derby, obviously. We can't model the batting practice pitches that people will be throwing. This week is Shark Week, buddy. Shark Week started last night. I was going to tweet something out to the effect of like, I don't know how to heal our great national divide, but one of my theories is that we move New Year's to the beginning of July, combine it with the 4th of July and Shark Week, put all that into one big week where everybody's off. And I feel like that's good step one in healing us as a nation, bringing us all together. Yeah, Lone Wolf, I assume we'll do it. If there's probably going to be, a cool, wacky single gamer with a big prize pool for the All-Star game. So we'll do something for that, assuming. It's a pain in the ass to put those together because you got to assign each squad a different team name. I got to make it like Yankees, Dodgers, or something like that, and then throw those together in the schedule and normalize. What park is it? Where's the game? Cleveland? I feel like it's in Cleveland for some reason. Is it in Cleveland? I'm probably dead wrong. Why did it not come up? Not the meow. Fuck it. Who cares? Whatever. I'll get into that. Do you know if DK includes the All-Star stuff in the Iron Man? Colin, that's not something I follow. The person to ask about that is EMAC from Osimo or Stochastic. Or just ping EMAC in my Discord, and I'm sure he'll answer. He follows all that stuff, and particularly on DK. I am no good at chasing those bonuses and stuff. Anyway, going down the board, Andrew Abbott, again, is good. Does have a lot of upside against that Colorado lineup. Could absolutely breeze through them, carve them up over 7 innings in a home game, and walk away with the slate. 9,500 on FanDuel makes a ton of sense. 8,200 on DraftKings makes a ton of sense. I just think he's also gettable, and there's upside to target against him. But it's both sides are there. Gav Williams, again, we're just kind of hamstrung by what the innings might look like. That's a 5-inning projection, 77-85 across sites. Hits the middle of the board pretty hard. I do think he's somewhat usable. I just question it a little bit, especially by comparison to John Gray at 73, who will be more highly owned. Just what's Gavin Williams' depth to a quality start on FanDuel looking like? 8,500, it's just an awkward price fit on DraftKings, having him as the second most expensive pitcher by comparison to Gray against the Angels, who's going to get more innings than that if everything goes well. Even Davis Daniel at 8,000 against a much tougher Rangers team, and then some of the bargain bin guys. Just a weird price fit, but semi-usable over there. Probably not going to be all that popular, I wouldn't think. Closed it. Let me check that, actually. That's another good... I know I looked at it before, but it fell out of my head what it was. What the hell? Why is this all screwy? All right. Now we're wasting time. There we go. Yeah, he's drawing more than I would have thought. Not that this is necessarily right. At 85 with a reasonable expectation, they're giving him more pitches than I would have. I cut him, not by much. I cut him a handful, like 6 pitches short. I question whether he should be owned in like the 20% plus range on DraftKings. I think it's a reasonable decision to undercut if the field is 20% wherever you get your ownership. I think that's a reasonable undercut. Davis Daniel, again, one good, one bad as far as his starts so far. He had that monster 8-inning game against the Tigers, but then he didn't exactly melt down in the most recent one, but he also wasn't good. That was a 5 1/3 inning start against the Athletics. Give up 4 earned runs on 7 hits, 5 runs total, just struck out 3, walked 1, gave up 2 homers. So that was a rough one. The fact that he went 5 1/3 and then he had gone 8 innings in the start before that, a 4-hit shutout ball, struck out 8 against the Tigers, it gives me faith that at least there's upside toward the quality start, the win bonus, et cetera, as long as he's having a decent day against that Rangers team. It's just, there's a lot of dangerous bats there. Gilbert Diaz, I mentioned before, 65, 6,000 makes a ton of sense to me as a value dart throw. I feel like we've got upside toward 6 innings. All's got to go pretty smoothly for the kid. I'm concerned about the lack of experience. It's obviously, even with the Braves scuffling and with plenty of strikeouts available, it's a tough opponent for a kid to debut against. But it's a playable DFS spot at those prices. He doesn't need to do a whole hell of a lot at those prices. Paddock, again, I got to check the rehab. He last started on the 21st. We'll pull it up here. We don't care about the rehab numbers, but I want to see what the innings were. 3 starts, got to 4 innings in the second one, but only 3 innings, faced 12 hitters in the most recent one. Oh, no, wait, this is last year. Did he not make any rehab starts? Yeah. Yeah, that's... It feels pretty limited. The fact that he's made no rehab starts after sitting out for 2 weeks, and it was sitting out with arm tiredness, dead arm, whatever you want to call it, feels really thin at 9,000 on FanDuel, even against that opponent. He does have believable upside with a full complement of pitches. I just don't know that we're getting more than the 4 innings that I gave him. So pretty limited there. And then 75 on DraftKings. It's just a dart, but I like some of the other ones better, especially for 500 less, just go to the top of the board with the chalky John Gray. Easy enough. Cater Montero is realistically going to give you innings if everything goes well. He started the other day, went 6 1/3 against the Twins, struck out 4, gave up a homer, but only 2 earned runs, 6 hits. I don't think he's good. It's a terrible matchup for him against the Guardians, and we're going to talk about Guardians bats in just a second. But somehow he's only 4,000 on DraftKings. Whoever's doing pricing at DraftKings needs to wake the hell up to what's actually happening on the baseball diamond lately. On the 26th, he went 4 1/3, gave up 5 earned runs on 5 hits and a home run, struck out 6, walked 3 against Philly. And I'm sorry, but anybody can give up a home run and 5 earned runs against Philly with, especially a limited pitcher with no experience. He was a mid-20 strikeout pitcher in the minors, so he's a reasonable enough talent. I don't understand how they arrived at 4,000. Like the kid making his debut today against the Braves is at 6,000. How do you have a $2,000 price difference there is completely beyond me. Chris Flexen, I just don't love the upside. 7,000, 6,500. He's fairly limited, and that twin squad is pretty good. And then Feltner against the Reds. I'm just targeting Reds bats on the other side of that one. I really don't see much room for Feltner to succeed here. If you want to throw the dart a few times at 55 on DraftKings, that's your spot if you're a big Feltner fan. But pretty thin. If you're a big Feltner fan, you should know that. Let's see. All right, let me grab some of these lineups. I updated the home run pick, by the way. I don't usually do that. Usually if I miss the pick, because we're getting the lineups later in a lot of ways. But the Guardians lineup came out before the show. Came out early enough that I was just like, screw it. So I made David Fry the new home run pick at 10.31. I had Joneski, I think that's how you say his name, Noel. But he's not starting. We get Daniel Schneemann instead. They're playing a little bit of platoon between those two guys. Not all the time, and Noel's got 2 of his home runs against righties. He's got 3 in just a handful of plate appearances so far. So I was really hoping that we would get him today. But we don't. Might pinch hit or something like that. But obviously that's not a good DFS play. But Guardians bats looking really, really strong here. Really like the top of the batting order. There are good mix and match plays through the bottom. On FanDuel, you get multi-position. You get several very cheap bats on both sites, and including Angel Martinez. Cheap bats in good spots in the lineup. Second base on FanDuel for 22. Second base and outfield for 28. Gives you a little bit of flexibility on DraftKings if you want to go to also cheap Andres Jimenez alongside him. So there's a lot of ways that Cleveland fits together with a lot of other teams. I like the fact that a lot of, much like the Royals, a lot of their good bats are in the infield. And then obviously there's Stephen Kwan up at the top of the lineup. A lot of ways that the Guardians can show value. Montero, for his 2 starts, his 15 innings, again, usable. Ignore the runs. Who cares? 4.22 xFIP underneath that ugly 6.60 ERA is good enough and believable. And we're not talking about somebody who needs to be an ace for 4,000 on DraftKings. So I think we just can fire away with that as a just free square kind of a play. And whether it works out or not, even if he gives you a few points, hopefully that's enough and you buy the right bats just to have made the play. So I think he's very, very much on the board and another easy path into Chris Sale shares. 6.60 ERA, though, he's given up some runs. Again, that was, It was 2 earned runs in the last one, but 5 earned runs over 4 1/3 against Philly, and then 4 earned runs on 5 hits over 4 1/3 against Pittsburgh in his first start. But he also struck out 5 in that one. Walked 1, gave up 2 home runs. What we definitely see, though, and we talked about it the last time he started, and it somewhat worked out. He limited that Twins team. We targeted him with the Twins bats that day, and if that concerns you about targeting him again with the Angels bat or with the Guardians bats today, apologies, but that's what I'm doing. This is what I'm targeting. That's what I'm targeting. This to whatever extent. 11.4% barrels in the show so far. 43.2% hard hits. A 6.06 home run percentage. He's faced 66 hitters in the show over his 3 starts, and he's given up 4 home runs. I had to adjust him down the other day in the model. I did give it a little tweak because I didn't want these guys again to be in the 20s necessarily. I don't know that that's completely real because he wasn't overly problematic with home runs in the minors. But the experience at high levels of the minors, 20 starts over the last 2 seasons. Last year, he did have a home run issue in AAA. 1.71 home runs per 9. This year, he cut it back down to where he had been through the lower levels of the minors. So maybe somewhere in between, which is why I throttled it down slightly. But you can see, still 3 monsters lurking there. If we had had Noel here, he would have been another one. He was at like 9 something. But Montero, again, very playable. 13% swinging strike rate. 28% CSW is all right. Could be better given that pretty strong swinging strike rate. But it's resulted in plenty of strikeouts. The issue, again, for that, though, is very low-end strikeout opponent. 17.8% strikeout rate for this confirmed version of the Guardians lineup. I don't know how often you would need to go to it at 6,800 on FanDuel. There are better options. He's on the board just because it's such a short and such an ugly slate, and he's so cheap by comparison even to John Gray or Gavin Williams or any of those guys. So he's not off the board, but the number of times he gives you 6 clean enough and gets to the quality start against this team with enough strikeouts to really hit, much more than that median are few and far between. He doesn't really even need to do much more than the median price for 4,000 on DraftKings. Gav Williams on the other side against a very gettable Tigers team. I just don't know that we're going beyond 4 innings, or 5 innings rather. He did go 4 in the most recent start. Like I said, it wasn't the most efficient game. He struck out just 2. He walked 2. Gave up 5 earned runs on 7 hits. He did face 21 hitters, but it only amounted to 70 some odd pitches. It wasn't he came back, faced, didn't go well, but he faced 21 hitters and threw 95 pitches. That wasn't the game. So I question the, depth to a quality start, even for 7,700 on FanDuel. I think you're probably dealing with just 20, 26, 28 points. And then you do have a little bit of win upside if he gives you 5. So you might get the win bonus out of it and get him to the low 30s. But I think that the upside is a little bit limited. Again, didn't have a good strikeout game in that performance against the White Sox, who are equally gettable, more gettable, honestly. He did have several decent strikeout games in the minor league rehab assignments. 6 Ks in 4 innings against 17 of the Royals AAA hitters. And then 4 in 2 starts. 1 was just an inning and 2/3 against the Cubs affiliate. And 1 went 5 innings, struck out 4 against the Mets affiliate. It amounted to a 34.5% strikeout rate in AAA over 5 innings five outings and 12 innings. Last year in the show in 2023, he had a 23.5% strikeout rate, a 10.7% walk rate. That was over 16 starts and 82 innings last year. 3.29 ERA with a 4.53 xFIP. He is a good pitcher. He could exploit, for the short amount of time that we get him today, he could exploit these high strikeout rates. But as you pile up strikeouts, you also pile up pitches. So if he has a 4 or 5 strikeout day by the 5th inning, that might mean that he's around his pitch maximum anyway. And then if you throw in any walks or hit problems or anything like that. So a limited option, 85 makes him more difficult to reach, especially if you're looking to pair somebody with Chris Sale on the DraftKings slate. I do think if you were talking about going like a, Abbott Williams, Gray Williams pairing like that, it's fine for that money. It's not probably the ideal way to spend your money, and a lot of people seem to be doing it, at least if the projections I was looking at are correct. If you get them owned above 20% in public ownership, wherever you're looking at, like I was saying before, I do think it's a spot you can easily undercut across a bunch of lineups. Limits the amount I would want him for 1 to 5 lineups at all, and then would limit my exposure across 20 or 150 lineups to lower, 15, 10, somewhere around there, 12. Have them, but don't overexpose them. We'll talk about the Tigers' bats against him first. Let's see if we got the lineup in while I've been ranting about the pitching. Looks like we did. Hit the like button, by the way. Hit the subscribe if you haven't done that before, so you know when these shows go live. Usually it's 3:15, 3:30, somewhere in that window, but you never know. Especially as we get toward football season and things get more and more chaotic. It's going to be fun. So hit that. Also, check out our pals over at acemind.io. Those guys do a killer job with sims and optimizers, every major sport. Use promo code rotoscouts all in caps, gets you 20% off your first month over there. So the Tigers confirmed lineup. Wensil Perez back in the leadoff spot, 3,400, 2,800, exceedingly cheap across both sites. He's got a 102 WRC plus over 270 plate appearances. Pretty limited in terms of the premium contact, but not a high strikeout guy. 19.6%. That helps offset some of the high strikeout numbers at the back of the lineup in the overall. Helps potentially limit, the ceiling for Gavin Williams. He's going to be hitting from the left side against the righty. They're starting the lineup with 3 out of 4 left-handed bats and some quality there. Colt Keith has been on a little bit of a tear, and he's already been a low strikeout, low walk, put the ball in play type. Sitting a little bit harder lately. He's up to 244, 291, 363. Long way to go to get to actual quality, but he's got 7 home runs, 5 stolen bases, just an 84 WRC plus, but a threatening enough left-handed bat. And if you're stacking Tigers, he's probably, that's 1, 2 right there are arguable for at least one of those 2 guys should be in most of your Tiger stacks. The top priority bat in the lineup is the cleanup hitter, Riley Green, especially at under 5,000 against this pitcher on the DraftKings slate. That's absurd. 3,600 is more correct on FanDuel. Green's got 17 home runs, a 239 ISO. He's created runs 39% better than average. He's the only guy in this lineup right now creating runs better than average. But that's way better than average. He's really, really good. 13.2% barrels, 46.9% hard hits. Strikes out a lot at 26.5, but also draws a ton of walks at 12.5. He's drawing more walks than he did last year. Strikeouts are slightly down. He's an improving young hitter from the left side who is very good right now and getting better. 261, 356, 500 slash line. Very, very good option. Marcana, low strikeout, high walk, just good at getting on base. Little bit of power left in the bat. He's got 6 home runs, but just a 113 ISO, not really hitting the ball all that hard. 3.1% barrels is down from even the 4.7 last year, 4.9 the year before. 37.9% hard hits is actually up by about a point over those 2 seasons. More than capable of putting bat on ball effectively in that spot in the lineup, but he's better when he's just relied on for correlated scoring. Right now he's sitting at a 93 WRC plus. If he was just more in an on-base spot rather than a spot where he's needs to be focused on hitting the ball a little bit harder, driving the ball, and helping drive in runs, I feel like he's just a better lineup fit that way. But he's playable in the 3 spot. 3,500, 2,800 helps especially because he's very, very cheap for a quality veteran and player who's down a little bit this season. Gio Urshela, I'm not really a big fan as far as a hitter. 249, 288, 306, a 70 WRC plus. Really just miscast in the 5 spot. He's never been an overly effective bat. He doesn't strike out all that much, so he does help offset a little bit of that, put the ball in play a little bit, but he also doesn't hit the ball hard. 26.6% hard hit rate this year, 33.2% last year. 2 years ago, that was good, and this 37.6% with 7% barrels. But that was more of an outlier. That was across 185 plate appearances. No, excuse me. 551 plate appearances. That was his big year. It was a full Yankee season, I think. Right? 285, 338, 429. That's an outlier season for him. Not a fan. And especially the way he's been performing the last 2 seasons, this season included. He's a mix and match player with multi-position at the corners, but you can find better first and third baseman on both sides. 2.15 in the home run model. Zach McKinstry, 27-24. Least plays 4 positions on FanDuel. 3 home runs, 4 steals, a 121 ISO, a 55 WRC plus. Sub Mendoza, 243 on base. Are pretty miserable numbers. Mix and match play at the absolute outside. Javi Baez, way sub Mendoza, a 209 on base percentage. There are people in chat who could find their way to a 200 on base percentage. Just step into pitches. That's not actually true, but wow, good home run derby coming together. Marcelo Ozuna's in it. Pete Alonso's in it. Bobby Witt's in it. Forget who else. Cujo, stay safe, buddy. Cujo's saying heavy rain and wind at the house. East Texas, 20 minutes outside of Tyler. We got anybody else in the Texas? Hopefully everybody's all right, and hopefully the lights stay on and you don't get too much issues with the rain. Hopefully it's just a bad storm and everything passes, buddy. But stay safe down there for sure. We also had, last I saw, I think Kevin Roth from RG lives in your neck of the woods because they didn't have a weather report. They had a note from the editor saying Roth was dealing with weather himself. I was looking at labs and other weather reports around, and it looks like everything's fine. Looks like he updated actually. Got something in, everything's fine. Says it might rain before the game in the Twins and the White Sox game, but it doesn't seem to matter. Real spills in Dallas. Sounds like it blew through this morning. Yeah, my uncle and aunt are in Dallas. And my cousin and his family. I assume they're okay. If you're watching out there, hopefully you are. And everybody stay safe. But yeah, let's keep on moving along with the slate here. So Tigers lineup further down. So Javi Baez at total mass 3,000, 2,100. You certainly limit your shares of Javi. There really hasn't been any upside to attach ourselves to throughout this season. Over 196 opportunities. Just we're exclusively dealing with the memory of him being a good hitter at this point. Akil Baddoo, 26-23, hasn't really given you much over 62 plate appearances. Does have 2 home runs. Pretty sure they came in both in that first game. Has a 208 ISO in the sample and a very good premium contact profile in that small sample of batted ball events. 11.4% barrels, 51.4% hard hits. I do believe in the multi-category talent, so I think he's DFS playable, and he's very, very cheap. I would have just wished for a better spot in the batting order. But if they're already throwing darts with the Tigers, you definitely can include him. Jake Rogers, moderately good premium contact upside. 6 home runs as a cheap catcher at the bottom of the lineup, at the bottom of the barrel as well. 9.6% barrels, down from last year's 12. 38.3% hard hits, down from 44.9 last year. It's only 181 plate appearances, 6 homers, a 143 ISO. It's a very, very limited Tigers lineup. But again, with Gavin Williams rounding into form, I think he might be gettable enough for another start. And they've got some frisky bats, at least in the top few. The Guardians side, I absolutely love. It's a team I like getting to anyway, just because of their ability to put the ball in play quite a bit, generate runs. They're hitting for a little bit more power this year. There's a lot of interesting hitters in this lineup. There's a lot of affordable options. There's a lot of lineup flexibility. I was referring to some of those guys before, but to get into it, Stephen Kwan off the top. One of the top table setters in baseball this year, probably the top guy over his 278 plate appearances. 364, 419, 538. He's creating runs 74% better than average. And he's somehow up to 9 home runs on the season. He's never hit for this much power. It's odd because just a 174 ISO, 22.9% hard hits, 2.2% barrels. Those are slightly up in terms of technically the barrels doubled from last year's 1.1%. But that's not a high barrel rate. That's not a high hard hit rate. He's just been able to, when he gets the right pitch or when he makes the decision to, he's been able to turn on the ball and drive it out of some of these parks. Having a tremendous season and is a very, very good hitter. In most cases, outside of those 9 exceptions, Stephen Kwan does need help from his friends. So he's a terrific correlated scoring piece. He's a key in Guardian stacks. And that's why he costs $5,800, $3,900. He is very, very expensive for what he does on the field. But he's also very worthwhile just given what he's doing. And we've got a track record of Stephen Kwan being this good at putting the ball in play, getting on base, and providing correlating scoring. So it's not just this year's performance. This is the most we've ever paid for him. But this is also the best he's been. You can offset that pricing with Angel Martinez. Second base and outfield on DK. Second base only on FanDuel. 28-22 across sites. Over 25 plate appearances. He's created runs 121% better than average in that small sample. 46.7% hard hits with 0 barrels. 375, 583, 500. It's been effective enough for my money as a switch hitter up toward the top of the lineup with multi-position for very, very cheap to help me pay for shares of Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor, who come next, who are both around halfway again on top of the magic number for home run upside at 15.81 and 14.96. Jose Ramirez has 23 home runs, 16 stolen bases, a 259 ISO, and a 137 WRC+. Naylor slides in at 21 home runs, 3 stolen bases, a 252 ISO, 125 WRC plus. Naylor's making a little bit more premium contact, 11.4% barrels compared to Ramirez's 9.1, 45.5% hard hits compared to the 40.1. They're both spectacular options. If you can put them both in a lineup, you absolutely should. David Fry, catcher on DK for 55. I love the option. You get Bo Naylor also at the bottom of the lineup for 31. So if you need a cheaper catcher, that's a reasonable enough alternative. Naylor does have power upside, has been nowhere near the model of consistency, and he strikes out a lot, but it's a very gettable pitcher for that lefty bat from the bottom. So I think there's a little bit of flex there. But Fry has been terrific. He's an all-star. 305, 412, 508 over 226 plate appearances now, 8 home runs, 203 ISO, creating runs 60% better than average. 20.4% strikeouts is also very good for him, by the way. That's down 6 points year over year. He's walking 5 points higher in the medium sample. 41.7% hard hits is up, but 7.6% barrels is actually down slightly from last year. And a bunch of his home runs came early in the stretch. So just keep in mind what kind of a bat he actually is versus what that initial output might have been. But I do think he's a very strong option. On FanDuel, he's catcher, first base, whatever, and then has outfield eligibility for 28. The outfield actually makes him a little bit useful. If you're filling part of your infield up with some of those other options, just being able to pop him in there and not use the util spot on FanDuel if you have Naylor already in your lineup at first base, I think does make it handy, and he's very, very cheap for the upside on FanDuel. You can see this is one that DraftKings actually has priced more correctly. 28 on FanDuel is exceedingly cheap for that bat. Andres Jimenez, 45, 3,000. Continue to believe in the talent. We just really haven't seen a lot of it this year. 0.090 ISO, 88 WRC plus. 14 steals is nice, but just a 307 on base. It's been difficult for him to get involved, but he's out there every day. He is a playable part in this lineup for a very cheap price that does help you average down the cost of some of those other bats. Like if you wanted to go on DK with, let's say you were going to forgo Kwan from the top and you just wanted to stretch that. That's probably not the best collection of their bats, but it is economical. That gets you to an average cost in a lineup, in a stack that does include Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, and the 3 hitters immediately around them for $4,900 on average apiece. You can see it down there. So that's a pretty good price average for having Ramirez and Naylor and the heart of the lineup against this pretty weak pitcher. If you used Kwan and just went through Martinez, maybe you skip Fry in that equation, and you're using Jimenez, and that keeps you right around the same price. It's slightly higher at $5,000. As an alternative, if you wanted to go like those 3, 4 in a weird one, that brings it down to just $4,500 for a stack that stretches out, but does still include the 3-man block from 2 through 4. That includes Ramirez and Naylor. Gives you Jimenez, who's a okay enough bat, and then a little bit of catcher home run power, and believable enough against a pitcher who again is at a 6.06 home run rate in his 2 starts. It's very limited samples with some of these options. So I think that's a believable enough stack. Naylor has limited correlation if he happens to get on, which he only does at a 270 clip. So not an ideal wraparound back to the top, but he could also clear the bases of, maybe Naylor's still on and Jimenez, if all goes according to plan. So there's some ways to get the Guardians for fairly cheap. That one, again, was 45 on DK. On FanDuel, outside of Ramirez, I think they're just, and Kwan, I guess, at the top, I think they're just straightforward cheap. So put them together however you want. You've also got a lot of positional flex on the FanDuel slate. Again, most of these guys just qualify in the infield. Technically, on FanDuel, the only guy that you have to play in the outfield is Steven Kwan. Can't we get Kwan at first base or something? Schneemann at 38.29. The FanDuel multi-position keeps him a little bit more interesting there, but he does have a 246 ISO over those 83 plate appearances. 3 home runs, a stolen base, a 143 WRC plus. It's been very effective. 10.4% barrels, 47.9% hard hits. A little bit of life in the home run model at 4.55. He's not Brian Rocchio anyway. 1.72 for him. He's also got 3 home runs, but he needed 3 times as many plate appearances to get there. Just an 88 WRC plus, a sub 100 ISO. He does have 7 stolen bases, but limited 318 on base percentage. Low strikeout, draws some walks, but doesn't really hit the ball all that hard. Every now and then you throw a dart at shortstop, but not often. And then Naylor, again, 5.5% barrels, 33.1% hard hits. The barrels are limited and down. The hard hits are actually technically up a little bit, but strikeouts are way up. 23% last year with a 13% walk rate. This year, 32.6 and just 7.9. 5 home runs on the season, but just a 133 ISO, 73 WRC plus. So again, no reliability. Your quality, your go-tos are maybe 7s included in that. And it's really like 7 and then some of those guys. This is just value. But the Guardians are highly, highly stackable. Guardians bats. Kader Montero for 4,000 against those Guardians bats, I guess. Then just an awkward fitting Gavin Williams in what will probably be a 5-inning start with a little bit of strikeout juice behind it. And then maybe contrarian Tigers bats against. Everything's at least loosely playable, but it's the bats probably look a little bit better, and the Cleveland bats are the clear top option in this game. Rockies and the Reds. Let's see, we got the Reds lineup. Nope. Got the Rocks lineup in pretty early today. So starting with Ryan Feltner, 5.60 ERA, a 4.01 xFIP underneath that is actually a little bit, I guess, not appealing. Appealing is certainly the wrong word. Indicative that maybe all the runs aren't his fault. 19.3% strikeouts is okay. It's below average, but for 5,500, trying to make the argument. 17 starts, he's given us 91 2/3, 1.46 whip, despite not really giving up that many walks. Does have a 10.4% swinging strike rate against the Reds lineup with an absurd 35.9. That can't be right. What the fuck is that measuring? Oh, this is probably 100% for Edwin Ramos. That's why. It's not an NA. That's 100%. I was like, yeah, that's over 1 plate appearance. I didn't think they were striking out 36% of the time. That would have made Feltner kind of interesting. I guess he's at least on the board. I was writing him off a little bit more than that. Maybe I need to give him a little bit of a goose for some strikeout potential. Because even if you take out the 100%, this is still a very high strikeout Reds lineup. It's just they're second highest total on the board, above 5.07. It's also a very frisky Reds lineup. The Feltner isn't terrible for power. 37% hard hits, 88 miles an hour of exit velo, just a 6.1% barrel, 2.97% home runs. Stuff plus isn't even all that far off the mark. Last year, over 43 1/3 in 10 starts. Not an ideal sample size, but just 1% home runs. 4.5% barrels, some fly balls, but was very effective at managing premium contact. Not as much the year before. You can see shades of the same guy in that mix, but he was way better at it in the small sample last year, and that's kind of continued so far this year. So at least that's somewhat interesting. 2 years ago, 5.83 ERA, 4.43 xFIP, 19.6% strikeouts. It's about the same. Walks were lower. Swinging strikes were way lower, and they were lower last year. There might be some sneaky steps going on with Feltner. Whoops. It's at least worth pulling them up real quick. I want to take a look at what we're doing differently. Oh, he's throwing his four-seamer way more. Interesting. When you look at the run numbers and everything, bear in mind that this guy pitches some of his games in Colorado. So these are not actually completely atrocious numbers in a lot of ways. Even the high whip. I don't know what his... I guess I could pull up his splits. I hate home road splits. But... all right, splits. A 6.75 ERA at home this year and a 4.65 ERA on the road. More road starts 50 or more road innings, 50 and a third versus 41 and a third at home. Strikeouts actually are higher at home by almost 3 points. 18% on the road versus 20.9 at Coors. Walks a fewer hitters on the road. Actually has a lower home xFIP. 3.50 xFIP at home. 4.43 xFIP on the road. Weird results. Anyway, what I find interesting is the increased this significantly. He took his fastball, his four-seamer from 28% usage last year in that sample, and then year before, it's more along the lines of what he was doing the year before, but he's getting more swinging strikes this season somewhere. So he's back to 30+% with the 35% with the four-seamer. Last year he was at just 28%. He was throwing 31% sliders. This year he's brought the sliders back to 28. He's throwing the sinker a little bit less and the change a little bit more compared to 2022. Yeah, he wasn't really throwing the change at all in 2022. And that has been a very effective pitch. That has a 38.3% whiff rate on that changeup. So that's where some of that swinging strike rate and some of the qualities come from. He throws that primarily to lefties. 185 of those have come against lefties. Only 27 of them have come against righties. But you will have a number of interesting high strikeout lefties in this lineup for him to do that to. Man, I didn't want to do this, but I'm a little bit more intrigued by Ryan Feltner on the other side of this Reds game. Odds are it's not going to work out. I probably still wouldn't do it. In 150 lineups, you could throw the dart a few times on FanDuel at 74. On DraftKings at 55, that's at least a little bit more interesting from the bottom of the board. Now, you could easily give him another point and change on that kind of projection of strikeout potential in there. There's just some reasons to doubt that how much of it is real, but that new pitch mix and the effectiveness of that changeup this year is at least somewhat interesting, and especially again against left-handed hitters, kind of interesting. It's a playable dart, and the weird thing is we've got this also terrible Montero option at 4,000. He is cheaper though than Gilbert Diaz, than John Gray, than all these other guys. I guarantee he's going to be lower owned than all those guys. One of the lowest owned pitchers. And it does crack into double-digit ownership, though, on DK in these projections. But again, that's Gav Williams was way up there. It's going to be really interesting to see how this breaks down. Anyway, that's your Ryan Feltner rant. That was unexpected. Brett dropping in Rhys Hines in the lineup. Yeah, that's another interesting one. Let's see if still not up on Labs, but let me grab that one. He's probably not available on FanDuel, so we'll have to put him in. Fortunately, there's only 5 games today, so we're just kind of taking a casual tour through the slate so far. If this is your first time here, we always are doing pretty in-depth looks at this stuff, and we do wind our way through, but welcome. Hit the like button and the subscribe button. But I assure you, we will get through this slate. Just a lot of interesting stuff now to talk about. It's these ugly ones where there's a lot of cheap options, but none of them are all that good. That's where we run into Ovi Marte. The hell is Hines' first name? Reese. R-E-C-E, or is it actually how you spell Reese? one of the several ways. Not that that's not. And who was hitting ninth? Willie. I almost typed Willie. Hines is available on DraftKings at the dead min, but as predicted, FanDuel did not get him in there. Remedy that real quick. Hines is lefty, righty. Sounded like a lefty. Sometimes you could just tell. All right. So Hines not available on FanDuel, but dead min on DraftKings. In the minor leagues this season, he is at a 328 plate appearances. He's at a 38.4% strikeout rate in AAA as a 23-year-old against AAA pitching. 8.5% walks. He's got 13 homers. He's got a 193 ISO, but he's slashing 216, 290, 409 with a 76 WRC plus in AAA. Last year in AA, 461 plate appearances, 32.8% strikeouts as a 22-year-old in AA. Did hit 23 home runs and stole 20 bases. He's got 12 steals this year, by the way. And much better slash line, 269, 330, 536, 121 WRC plus. 104 WRC plus in high A the year before that with 10 home runs and 13 steals. Struck out at 39.1% that year. I feel like it's a kid who's going to be at least a little bit challenged by Major League pitching, and whether or not you categorize Ryan Feltner as Major League pitching is entirely up to you, but I think we at least did 10 minutes just a second ago proving the case, or at least pleading the case. Definitely puts another target on the board for Feltner, and then you get Will Benson, a lefty with a 40.1% strikeout rate current year and had a 31.3% last year. I love Will Benson. I think he's a really good player, especially for DFS purposes. But he's sub Mendoza over 277 plate appearances, a 275 on base, a 77 WRC plus, and again the aforementioned 40.1% strikeout rate. He can also mash the ball when he makes contact, but with Feltner throwing that changeup so much to left-handed pitching and using it as an out pitch and getting nearly 40% whiff rate with it, I'm super compelled about his strikeout upside with Hines and Benson at the bottom of the lineup. You throw Noelvi Marte into the mix, who's at 34.1% over his 41 plate appearances, a 9 WRC plus. It's obviously a very, very small sample. Noelvi had a much more manageable teens and low 20s strikeout rate through the minors and then through his first sample of 123 plate appearances in the show last year. So he's a lower end strikeout target than those other guys, but a very young, inexperienced pitcher or hitter who has not really found his footing so far this season. The 100% strikeout rate obviously is a little bit of a fiction because it's only one plate appearance so far. Last year in 34 plate appearances, Edwin Rio struck out at 47.1%, which is, if you're not familiar, is quite high. Through, let me include the minors. Through 203 plate appearances in AAA this season as a 30-year-old, 28.6% strikeouts, 11.8% walks. Last season, over 176 AAA plate appearances, 30+%. Year before, 218 AAA plate appearances, 30+%. For his major league career in 326 plate appearances, 33.7%. So another believable strikeout target later in the lineup who is a left-handed hitter. There's going to be some swing and miss here, and here, potentially, for Ryan Feltner. I did not intend to come into this as like a gigantic sales pitch for Ryan Feltner because it is almost certainly not going to work out. But you can at least see where the strikeouts could come from. Tyler Stevenson, just a good hitter, good Reds bat, just a 17.7% strikeout rate, could definitely do some damage and chase Ryan Feltner on his own. Two of those guys above Tyler Stevenson get on base, even if two more of them strike out, and then Stevenson gets a chance at a long ball, and with his frequency of contact, that could ruin Ryan Feltner's day right there in the first inning, and you're just shot in the foot And then he needs to find those strikeouts. There's a path for him, even if he doesn't have a big strikeout day, if he manages to keep some of these hitters off the board at that low price. The question is, how much more interested in am I getting on FanDuel now? Well, I've got in the lineup that I built earlier, I've got the Reds against Feltner. Stupid. Anyway. So yeah, I guess he's on the board. And then continuing on up that Reds lineup, which wasn't how I intended to do this, but Spencer Steer is certainly interesting. 20.4% strikeout, so another much more manageable strikeout guy. Double-digit walks, the ability to hit the ball pretty hard. 41.7% hard hits on the season. 13 homers, 13 steals. An effective but low end front part of the triple slash at 243, but a 335 on base is good. 436 slug is all right. 193 ISO is very good. 114 WRC plus. He's been tremendous this year. You still get the eligibility on FanDuel at second base. He's cheap on DraftKings, but he fills first base, so it's a positional blocker for Jeimer Candelario above him, or then very cheap Edwin Rios below him. So a little bit of a tougher fit on DK. He's full priced on FanDuel at 35. You're not getting a discount on him, but he's a talented guy. And again, second base eligibility is nice for that bat. Candelario, 7.8% barrels, dead on numbers for where he's been the last couple of seasons. Strikeouts are up 2 points. It's around a 1 in 4 strikeout opportunity, but certainly some home run upside. 6.50 in the home run model. Just 3,000 at the corners on FanDuel. 4,300, very, very playable on DraftKings. 14 homers, a 216 ISO, 103 WRC plus, and was scuffling through the first month and a half and change, maybe 2 months of the season. Really has pulled himself together and just looks like himself. So highly playable 3-hitter. Jonathan India in the top spot in the lineup with a 375 on base, a 121 WRC plus, continues to be a strong correlated scoring option for a very cheap price. Another effective second baseman on DraftKings. He just is your second baseman in this lineup on FanDuel. A mix and match piece with shares of Steer, where you move Steer to the outfield, probably less so at first base, but makes them flexible and provides options for construction and a cheaper bat at $2,900 on the FanDuel slate, and certainly correlates very well with their superstar, Elly De La Cruz. 6,300, 4,200, 15 home runs, 43 stolen bases, a 122 WRC plus, a monster season by any reckoning. But Elly does strike out 31.4% of the time and will be hitting from the left side in this game. So that gives him his power stroke and all his upside. Not that he doesn't have power on the other side of splits, and we've revealed that some of that is at least come around this year, but he's better on the left side. It's just there, that does potentially feed the sneaky strikeout stuff for Feltner. Ugh, God, can I sell that any worse or harder? Can I be any worse to you guys by trying to sell Ryan Feltner? I'm not trying. It just happens sometimes. Abbott on the other side. This is where I run into some concerns about an expensive and probably very popular Andrew Abbott. Over 96 innings this year in 17 starts. He's facing the very low-end Rockies, who have a 25% strikeout rate on the season, but it can't all come from their side. And Abbott's been a concern. 18.5% strikeouts, 9% walks, 91, he's further below by a significant margin if we're just talking about stuff plus than Feltner is. He's given up a 4% home run rate despite being pretty good at limiting premium contact, because when he makes mistakes, they tend to be on the barrel of the ball, and a lot of them happen in this ballpark. 21.5 degree average launch angle, so he's a fly ball trajectory pitcher against the lineup with some guys who just sell out for home run power. I'm a little concerned there around the power and the home run results. I'm a little concerned about the limited swinging strikes, the CSW, the high walk rate, the low strikeout rate, the fact that the XFIP is nearly 5 and significantly higher than what the run total looks like on the surface. The 3.28 ERA is sparkling. It comes nowhere near that 4.94 XFIP. Last year, he was a lot better. 26.1% strikeouts were much stronger. He still walked a lot of guys at 9.6%, but was getting more swinging strikes. Reasonably higher CSW, but still not a good CSW. Was giving up more premium contact, similar barrels in average launch, making those same mistakes. 3.49% home runs. So I just think he's deceptively limited, deceptively average. Lefty pitcher against a lineup that's going to be heavily right-handed with the lefty at least one of the two lefties up at the top are pretty high quality. The other's Charlie Blackmon, who's had a good career but is limited at this point. I can absolutely see the Rockies getting there. And for me, that was one of the lineups I was dabbling with, was instead of using the Reds, using the Rocks on the other side of this one, sticking with my Guardian stack and then paying up for Chris Sale. And I got to tell you, that clicked together quite nicely with some of these bats that I like. And then you get a not completely unuseful Shunk at the bottom of the lineup. An actual player name, not just like a way to refer to whatever's in that batting order spot. Dead min price on both sites with middle position and middle infield position eligibility on FanDuel. Just a shortstop on DK is less useful, but if you're going there, he's at least mid priced. So I think they come together kind of interestingly against a pitcher that I don't fully trust. I do think, again, if you're building a bunch of lineups, he's absolutely in your plans on DraftKings at 82. He's tough to reach for me at 95 on FanDuel. If I'm building 20 on FanDuel, I probably build 10 before I get to my first Andrew Abbott lineup, between just some of the value plays and then a ton of Chris Sale and John Gray. I do think he's on the board. I do think he has some upside if he can find that strikeout form. In his most recent start, he faced the Yankees. He went 6 1/3. He gives you decent depth a lot of the time. Maybe some upside for the quality start. And again, it's a pushover opponent in a lot of ways. Struck out 2 Yankees, walked 4, just 1 earned run on 3 hits because my Yankees suck right now. But that wasn't an overly appealing start outside of the limitation of runs in the innings. 5 innings to start before that, gave up just 2 earned on 2 hits, struck out 2, but walked 6. Aggressively rough. Faced the Red Sox 5 2/3, had a good one. 10 strikeouts, just 1 walk, but gave up 2 home runs. Can't find like a consistently just quality across the board good start in this mix. But there are a lot of days where he goes 5-6, limits runs to below 3. It's just a question of what kind of strikeouts and walk upside you get or downside you get. So as mentioned, I am considering the Rockies as a value angle into the slate, and Vegas doesn't hate them. 4.04. There's a lot of days where we get the Rockies sub 4. And I tell you what, if this happened to kick up by another half run, obviously it makes them even more interesting. But we'll see if we get that out of it. I think it would be believable to add another half a run here. 41.27 for Charlie Blackmon off the top, 256, 326, 404 again. Just a limited form of Charlie Blackmon at this point. A 148 ISO and 91 WRC plus. He's okay at getting on base. He doesn't really strike out. He does put the ball in play. Lefty this season for Charlie. Still effective same-handed. 308, 390, 442. Just a 135 ISO, but a 124 WRC plus. So, and 5.1% strikeouts with 8.5% walks. That's over 59 plate appearances. Not a huge sample, obviously. Very limited sample. But that's reasonable quality, and he's always been good lefty-lefty. For the career... career 305, 364, 464, 158 ISO, 110 WRC plus. Same-handed compared to 289, 349, 489 with a 200 ISO, 109 WRC plus against the opposite hand. Just a lot more of his power came against the opposite hand, but maybe potentially even underrated and underappreciated at a very low price. Even I was underappreciating when I was talking about it off the top there. So a little bit of on-base upside, certainly very, very low strikeout. So balls in play. It's really all we're looking for. And a patient enough hitter. Patient veteran guy who could absolutely exploit the high walk rate. Tovar's just having a good year, 266, 293 is weak. He needs to improve that on base percentage. But he's hit 12 home runs, a 175 ISO. He's 11 points below average for run creation. That would climb with a higher on base. But he's improved in several areas, and he's a very interesting hitter. 37.8% hard hits on the year, 4,600, 2,900. He's not expensive across sites. 7.75 in the home run model, a solid projection. Solid number 2 in the lineup, and one of the top priority bats. Ryan McMahon for 45.31 across sites, has 14 home runs, a 182 ISO, 111 WRC plus. A lot of numbers have cooled, but he's still, he's just kind of normalized back to the Ryan McMahon that we've known for years, who we would be targeting in this spot if we were looking at Rockies. So 9.79 in the home run model, I don't think is exaggerated. perfectly fine. I like the slash line so far this season, and he's been one of their top run creators, and he's still making better premium contact than he ever has. So absolutely a buyer on McMahon shares at third base. Elias Diaz for just $4,000, $2,600. Their cleanup hitter basically every day. Cheap catcher who doesn't strike out, doesn't really walk that much, so the ball's in play a lot. He doesn't crush the ball, but he's slashing 304, 350, 432, 105 WRC plus. Can easily get him in play against this pitcher. Sometimes, again, when low strikeout collides with low strikeout, again, you're just looking for cheap balls in play. From a position like catcher, getting him in the cleanup spot for that price, killer. Brendan Rodgers at 37-31. I prefer him hitting higher in the lineup, but you take him at 6. 10% barrels this year, 40.9% hard hits over 300. I was looking at the wrong line. 4.4% barrels, 45.1% hard hits. Last year it was 11% barrels, so the barrels are down this year. But over 281 plate appearances, 285, 327, 407, 92 WRC plus with 5 home runs on the board. He's been an effective bat for them this year. Again, saying that about guys who are below average for run creation is a little bit awkward, but relative to the quality of the Rockies, he's been effective. And then we get to 3 interesting bats. 4,300, 3,900, 3,800 for Brenton Doyle, Michael Toglia, and Hunter Goodman. And Hunter Goodman has catcher eligibility on DraftKings. On FanDuel, they're 31, 27, 25 with a mix of positions. But those guys are particularly interesting. That's going to be a run of right-handed power that Andrew Abbott and his high home run rate are going to have to navigate. You give up a fly ball to one of those guys, and they could absolutely drive it out. You can see where Talia's at 10.93 in the home run model. Over 165 plate appearances, he's already got 10 on the board. 236 ISO. He's not at all consistent. 32.1% strikeouts is very high, but making contact, he's elite. 16.3% barrels, 50% hard hits so far. Small sample still, sure, but this is who he's supposed to be. This is what he's done in the minor leagues. Hunter Goodman is similar, 11.4% barrels, 43% hard hits so far. 7 home runs in just 119 plate appearances out of him. 234 ISO, but just a 57 WRC plus because of a 180, 218, 414 slash line. 28.6% strikeouts. They do become a little bit rough to stack sometimes together in lineups because a lot of times you're looking at, all right, between the 6 plate appearances, the 7 plate appearances that those guys drew, they had one successful one between them. And it resulted in a home run, but the other guy gave me a 0. You get a lot of those days out of those very, very inconsistent hitters. But I think the ceiling spike is worth chasing in a lot of ways if you're stacking Rockies. And then I was talking about the 2 lower-end home run bats. And then you get Brenton Doyle, who's just good, hitting above them in the 6th spot for just 4,300. 10% barrels, 40.9% hard hits this year. Already up to 11 home runs and 20 stolen bases with a 103 WRC plus and 349. And an effective triple slash. 272, 336, 440. Brenton Doyle's just good. Last year, he was limited in the slash line, which is why it's a great improvement over 431. But he hit 10 home runs, stole 22 bases. So it's not like this is out of nowhere. And then Shunk at the bottom of the lineup again is just at the dead min. How's his name? Aaron. There he is. Over 299 AAA plate appearances this year for Colorado's affiliate. He's slashing 291, 339, 469 with a 178 ISO, 7 home runs, 11 steals. In 508 plate appearances last year, he had 14 AAA home runs and 12 stolen bases with a 290, 350, 461, but a 93 WRC plus, 24% strikeouts, a 170 ISO. Probably more of like an effective line drives type hitter, but landed in the mid-teens in full seasons in both of those. The bad news there is he was in Double-A, he was 24 back in 2022 when he hit 14 home runs. He was 25 last year in Triple-A when he hit those 14 and stole those 12 bases. And this year he's 26. 26 not being old for the show, but certainly for those Triple-A plate appearances. A little bit ancient. But for the dead men, in a spot where there's no way he's going to be popular outside of just people taking value, I think he's probably got more actual realistic real life upside than just a free square kind of a play. So I think he's on the board. It is Reds bats, Andrew Abbott, Rockies bats, and then and only then that ridiculous 20 minutes of the show that I chewed up talking about Ryan Feltner. But he's on the board. He's on the board, and it honestly at this point would not stun me if he came away with an unexpectedly high strikeout total. Just got to find some clean innings. That's always a challenge. There we go. Fortunately, we can move off of that game now, and we'll talk about the Twins and the White Sox. Got the White Sox lineup in. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Michael Knack's grandson's Little League team is better than the Rockies. Might be more highly paid than some of these Rockies at this point. They're like a minor league lineup. I'm sure there's not a lot of investment going into the bats that are actually on the roster. Stephen Lee Boots, am I late? Nah, you're early, buddy. Going to be plenty of time to rewind and rewatch. 69 people out there. You guys absolutely rock. I'm not even going to make a stupid joke. Just hit that like button for me if you get a chance. Hop into our Discord if you're not in there already. A lot of chat going on in the Discord. It's always a place where you can reach me with any questions, comments, concerns, changes. Point out, hey, dummy, that lineup came in and you never updated it kind of thing. Ask for updates to home run projections that don't need them like our pal Mamba did to me the other day. I think that was Mamba. Unreleased lo-fi music. Would you go Olsen or Seager in FanDuel Cash straight up? Probably Seager, better spot in the lineup and probably the higher end overall player. But that's not crazy far apart. And I know you know it's not crazy far apart because you asked the question. To put numbers on it a little bit better for you. Olsen's there at 11-11 in the home run model. So if you're into like numerology and cool shit like that, you could certainly go that way. Seager is just right there at 10.84. And again, probably the better of those two hitters. I am a sucker for Matt Olson. Seager's going against Davis Daniel, and Olson is facing Gilbert Diaz in his debut. It's just Olsen, if you're not getting the home run upside, 239, 321, 426 this year, he does have his struggles as far as being like a consistent hitter, where even in a down season, Seager's at 271, 352, 473. He's got that 202 ISO. He's up to 16 home runs, which is more than Olsen has. He's lower strikeout, higher walk. So you just get more probability, even on a bad day, that Seager at least gives you a little something. And they've got similar ceilings, so it's probably like a lower floor, higher ceiling, lower floor, same ceiling, lower floor, similar ceiling. That's probably how I would decide it. I think you said it was a cash game too, so that's probably the way I would go. Travis Wyndham sounds like he made it home from work. Holy bejesus, that was an intense drive home from work. Was it one of those ones where you can't see through the front windshield because it's just so much rain, even though the windshield wipers are on? I almost called them headlights. Glad you're home safe, buddy. Stephen Leibowitz, make the joke. It's eating on me. We're not on that number anymore. We're back to it. How about that? Just when I thought we were off of it, we got flipped back over, and nah, that's not going to work. Tried to get there. Anyway, Twins bats. A very high-quality Twins team with everybody in the lineup well above average for run creation. Granted, Brooks Lee has only made 21 plate appearances. That's why currently he's at 122% better than average. That'll probably come down over time. Pretty confident saying that. And then in the bottom spot, Matt Wallner, who is actually kind of an interesting bat, just in an 82 WRC+. Those are your two only, really, really small sample sizes. All of these are half-season sample sizes, basically, at this point. So everybody on this Twins team has been pretty damn good for run creation. There's power. There's a good amount of speed on this lineup. There's some good on-base skills. It's a really threatening spot for a guy with a 5.08 ERA, a 5.05 xFIP, a 17.2% strikeout rate, a 9% walk rate, a 9.6% swinging, and 25.5% CSW. Home run Paul Goldschmidt. 409 home run rate on the season, 8.1% barrels. 17-degree average launch, so he's just a fly ball trajectory pitcher, just feeding home run upside. fading run creation upside. And then what I think has been consistently the funniest stat among all starting pitchers this season that I've been tracking is the almost halfway to it. Just might as well not be pitching, I guess. If you're halfway below league average, if you get another halfway below, you should probably just quit. Even if you're halfway to average, you should probably also just quit. It's kind of stunning that a guy with stuff like that can even succeed as much as Flexen does in the show. 65, I don't think we go there all that often. 7,000, I don't think we go there all that often on the FanDuel slate. And I actually, at this point, probably like Feltner quite a bit better for 1,000 less, which is really weird to say. Paddock on the other side, 75, 9,000. As discussed, we did not get rehab outings. Has been out since the 21st with a dead arm and did not make any rehab starts. I'm concerned that we get 4 innings, maybe 5 at the absolute outside. It's very difficult to see at 9,000 on the FanDuel slate. Even in a full start, it would be a high price for Chris Paddock, even against the White Sox. It's our most targetable team or second most targetable team all season long. They are a little bit lower strikeout at 22.6% than, say, like the Mariners are, which is why I said maybe, second best target, but it's a very high-end target to chase after. It's just Paddock, on the season, 5.29 ERA, a 4.05 xFIP is certainly better, 10.8% swinging strikes is good, but just a 27% CSW despite despite the 10.8% swinging, a 5.2% walk rate, but a 1.43 whip. Just a 20.3% strikeout rate, a lot of power allowed in every part of it. 90 plus miles an hour of exit velo, 43.5% hard hits, a significant fly ball trajectory on average, and a 9.8% barrel rate amounting to a 3.78% home run that actually could be a little bit lucky. So this is just a really challenging price fit, especially when we consider that we're probably not getting anything approaching 6 innings. 75 on DraftKings, it's more on the board. You could throw that dart a little bit from here, but given the free square type values that we've got with some of these other dart throws, and then a more realistic John Gray at 7,000, I don't know how much you need it. It's there, but it's really somewhat capped just artificially by what expectation looks like. I think you can, but probably should not draw some White Sox bats against Chris Paddock. Certainly much more appeal on the what will be a much more popular twin stack. To start with the worst of the two teams, Tommy Pham leads off for the White Sox. 4 home runs, 5 steals, a 103 WRC+. Definitely been one of their more effective hitters, an interesting enough multi-category bat that if you're stacking White Sox, he's top 3 priority. I'm just now noticing there's no Luis Robert in the lineup, so further downgrade to the White Sox. A little bit of a bump. It's still all within the paradigm that we just discussed for Chris Paddock there, but it does certainly help him out that there's no Lou Bob in the lineup. So yeah, that makes Tommy Pham one of like 2.5 priorities in this lineup. He's very cheap at the top of the board, a little bit of power, a little bit of stolen base upside. Andrew Benintendi just basically sucks at this point. 197, 249, 297. A 100 ISO. He's got 6 home runs. Good for him. Very, very limited output so far this season. From a guy who's just paid to put the ball in play, reach first base. He is still low strikeout, low walk. It's just a lack of success that's just glaring right now and has been for more than a full season. Andrew Vaughn has surged a little bit lately. He's up to 11 home runs, but still just a 95 WRC plus a 154 ISO. It's really just a power play at this point. He's not a bad strikeout option for a guy with a little bit of pop in the bat. 22.4% strikeouts isn't bad. 9.5% barrels and 44% hard hits are good. Just needs to improve the overall effectiveness, but a cheap upside, a cheap power bat at 6.49 in the home run model. I think HBO jumped on the Shark Week theme. Yeah, Open Water's on now. I was watching Deep Blue Sea before. Love Deep Blue Sea. As schlocky, I'm sure I've talked about this before, but as schlocky D movies go, you can't do much better than Deep Blue Sea for my money. Unless you're talking like those extreme, sci-fi channel type, Octopus versus Mecha Shark type productions. That's a whole nother ballgame. For Hollywood, intentionally B category type movies, B, D, whatever you want to call them, Love deep blue sea. Gavin Sheets, lefty bat, 3,200, 2,600, first in outfield on both sites, over 300 plate appearances. We got 7 home runs, a 157 ISO. He is at a 102 WRC plus, one of the 3 positive run creators this season. 6.56 in the home run model, low enough in terms of strikeouts at 19.3, 11.3% walks. He's just an average-ish kind of a bat, but he's very cheap against Chris Paddock here, and then the bullpen. Eloy Jimenez, 4,000, 2,800. Their best bat in this version of the lineup anyway. That said, he's at 230, 289, 354 over his 194 plate appearances where he's been available this year. 5 home runs, just a 124 ISO. But he does have 10.5% barrels and 49% hard hits to his credit this year. 18.6% strikeouts. A lot of very, very high quality bat on ball out of Eloy Jimenez, if nothing else. And he only costs $4,000 on DraftKings now. That's really cheap. 8.72 in the home run model to lead the team. If you're stacking White Sox, he's your first click. Paul DeJong, believable power upside from the shortstop. 16 home runs, a 212 ISO on the season. 103 WRC plus, another one of their positive run creators. Lenyn Sosa, a little bit of ability to strike the ball. 258, 293, 87 slash line with 4 home runs, 3 steals. Just a 129 ISO, but that premium contact profile is kind of intriguing. 8.3% barrels, 45.5% hard hits. And then Nicky Lopez and Martin Maldonado at the bottom of the lineup are highly, highly skippable. Lopez is an option to maybe put the ball in play and provide correlated scoring at a cheap price. Maldonado every now and then, and it's the extreme version of every now and then now. Every now and then he can connect with one, drive it out of the park. But over 139 plate appearances, 2 home runs, 101, 147, 171, and a negative 13 WRC plus. Twins lineup is significantly better. You can see just premium contact galore out of these guys. A lot of guys in the 40s for hard hits, several double-digit barrel rates further down the lineup, and then a lot of these guys at pretty solid barrel rates for medium-strength hitters who are all at fair prices. Willie Castro for just 48.29 continues to have a strong season, 129 WRC plus, getting on at a 357 clip. He's hit 7 home runs and stolen 10 bases. He's always been a good source of steals. Strikeouts are down a little bit. Walks are exactly the same as last year. Hard hits are way up for him at 38.6%. That's still, an average-ish trending toward good hard hit rate. But for him, that's an exceptional hard hit rate. It's really took a nice spike this year. Still very cheap and affordable. Very cheap and affordable, apparently. Very cheap and has multi-position eligibility. Second base and outfield on DK and 4 positions on FanDuel. Love the option. Carlos Correa, 5,400. DraftKings is just bouncing back and forth with correctly pricing him and mispricing him, but we're at a good price today. Could be a couple hundred more expensive, but that's a correct price. 36 on FanDuel is definitely effectively fairly priced. 305, 376, 508 this season, a 202 ISO, 11 home runs, creating runs, 48% better than average. He's been one of the top shortstops in baseball this year. He's really, really good. 4,000, 2,900 for Trevor Larnach, who has a 9.8% barrel and 42.7% hard hit this year. Both of those are good numbers that are down compared to the last 2 seasons for him. So there's lurking power for Larnach. That's a very cheap price on DraftKings. Pretty cheap price on FanDuel as well at 2,900. Over 201 plate appearances has been okay. 242, 303, 412 is a mediocre slash line. 8 home runs is all right. 170 ISO is all right. Still creating runs, 3% better than average. He's an effective bat with lurking upside for more. Jose Miranda is just a good hitter with solid line drive capability and a little bit of additional home runs to boot this year. He's up to 9 homers in 263 plate appearances. He's also on a tear of 12 games in a row where he's whatever the hell it was. He had a good stat. Twelve hits in a row. That's what I meant to say. I knew it was hits. I was like, 12 games in a row, that 12-game hit streak, that's not impressive. It was 12 straight at bats with hits, which is just downright impressive. So for 47-34, third base he's fine, honestly, at third base. He's always been able to drive the ball. 41.4% hard hits, 8.1% barrels, extreme low strikeout and low walk rate. So again, ton of balls in play. 34 at either corner on FanDuel is absolutely an option. Kepler underperforming his talent this season, over 251. He's just got 6 home runs. He's got a 145 ISO. 103 WRC plus is still effective. Striking out sub 20%. not really drawing that many walks. So again, another guy who's just absolutely able to put the ball in play with a lot behind it at 8.2% barrels and 41% hard hits this year. It's just we've seen him at higher levels in terms of the power output, the ability to make premium contact. Byron Buxton, after a strong surge, is up to 275, 327, 485, 210 ISO, 9 home runs, 5 steals, a 129 WRC+. Looking a whole hell of a lot more like himself lately. High-end option that, honestly, I don't think anybody's, or I'm sure other people have, I don't think everybody has caught up to yet. Certainly not the pricing on either site. 4,600, 3,200 across sites for a reclaimed version of Byron Buxton. Absolutely sign me up for some shares of that. Brooks Lee, 3,000, 2,800, has had a tremendous first 21 plate appearances. Highly, highly playable option late in the lineup. 3,000 at third base, exceedingly cheap, and he's a high-end prospect for them. Honestly, I think he's playable enough at that price. Just a positional blocker for Jose Miranda, but a $1,700 discount makes him a reasonably good pivot. You get shortstop eligibility out of him on FanDuel, third base as well, so you got to make some combination decisions there. But he does put another cheap, effective multi-position bat into this lineup. Ryan Jeffers has power at the catcher position. He's got 14 home runs at 243 ISO over 277 opportunities. 10.2% barrels is all we're looking for. Doesn't really strike out all that much, at least not this season. Last year he was at 27.8. That's a significant jump, down to 20.9% this year. And then Wallner for just 3,000, 2,400 across sites. Effective enough. 14 home runs in 254 plate appearances last year. Had a 258 ISO, 144 WRC plus in that, not quite half a season, but quarter, more than a quarter, third of a season. That's a pretty good stretch for a young power bat. I feel like everybody's going to forget Matt Wallner at the bottom of this lineup. 5.07 in the home run model, 2,400 on FanDuel. If you're building a bunch of twins, if you build one, then, whatever, you might not get to the 9 hitter. But if you're building like 5 twin stacks, Matt Wallner should be in 2 of them, if not more. High strikeout, no doubt about it. Could give you a 0 for the price. You're welcome. But could also win you a slate. I mean, he's got significant power upside against Chris Flexen. That is not uninteresting. Twins bats. Meh. I honestly don't really want either pitcher. If I had to choose, it would be Paddock in a limited start, certainly against the White Sox, and it would mostly be on DraftKings. Really limited by price here. Just wouldn't play Flexen. I really think it's too thin. And then White Sox bats, very limited and mediocre, but going to be low owned, and they're very, very low cost. I think I prefer the Rockies in the ballpark advantage, even against a better pitcher, or an arguably similar pitcher who will make a deeper start, let's say. I think I prefer the Rockies as a cheapo angle. Angels and the Rangers, 2 games to go. It's 5 o'clock, 6:40 start time today. We'll get out of here in plenty of time for that, to get the projections updated for this limited slate of games. Davis Daniel going for the Angels against a up-and-down Rangers squad that is thinking about punting and loading up for the future, allegedly. Going to make their decision about that soon, they said. Definitely still some interesting and threatening high-end bats in this lineup, but they've definitely not been the same team as they were last year. Daniel's at least somewhat appealing. In his 2 starts, 13 and a third, a 2.70 ERA, but a 3.38 xFIP underneath it. That's a run and change, or half a run and change higher, but it's still an effective xFIP. He's walked just 2%, struck out 22%. Now, again, we broke this down earlier. That amounts to an 8 strikeout game over 8 innings of 4-hit shutout ball against Detroit that was completely unexpected. And then a 3 strikeout, 4 runs on 7 hits over 5 1/3 performance in his last start against the Athletics. The Rangers are definitely better than both of those teams. They're lower strikeout than both of those teams. I'm a little bit concerned about where he's priced. I do think... Whoops. Shit. I do think extreme zoom. Extreme close up. I do think where he's priced is the problem rather than where he's projected, just solidly in the middle of the board. It's just by comparison to some of the other, potentially more effective, higher projected options, or the more extreme dart throws further down. He's not exactly safe, and I don't even know that he's got the upside that, might be apparent just looking at the game log, or just looking at like the rates and the numbers over the 2 starts. In AAA this year, over his 14 starts, 76 innings, he had a 24.3% strikeout rate, which is good. A 5.33 ERA, which is bad, with a 4.66 xFIP, which is pretty also bad. 21 starts in AAA in 2022. He had a 19.4% strikeout rate with a 4.49 ERA and a 5.83 xFIP. By the way, that was also as a 25-year-old back in 2022 at AAA. And then the numbers from this year as a 27-year-old. Did not pitch all that much last year. I'm not totally sure what his injury was or whatever. So, I think this could be a little bit trappy if people are pushing it. I expect he'll get a little bit popular here because he's one of the, again, middle of the board, and I'm sure he's projected similarly across town. Not extreme expense. Gave you a good start, a few back. Like I could see people getting on board with it. I think it's a little bit of a trap. John Gray on the other side, probably a much bigger trap, quite honestly. Can't say it about one guy and then not have it be true about the guy who's been way up and down this year. But over time, we've gotten to know John Gray pretty well. We know he is an effective enough pitcher, even with a average to below average arsenal of pitches. And that's kind of true this year. 3.92 ERA on the whole, just a 4.07 xFIP is not that far off the ERA mark. A very solid 11.8% swinging strike rate, just a 27.1% CSW, a lot of base runners for just a 6.4% walk rate. He's given up a ton of premium contact this year, but it hasn't really burnt him. So arguably getting lucky to be at these numbers. But he's always been at those kind of numbers. He did it without giving up all that premium contact last year. 4.12 ERA, 4.37 xFIP, a better swinging strike rate, similar-ish but a point higher strikeout rate last year. Much better for strikeouts 2 years ago with a 3.96 ERA, 3.46 xFIP. This was around the best stretch that we ever saw him for. 24 starts, 127 and a third that season. It was very, very good that year. A lot of strikeout upside, a lot of cheap DFS upside. Getting him against the Angels here, at least with him around 1 in 5 strikeouts, we'll see what version of this Angels lineup we get, but they're 1 in 5 or higher. I think it's a gettable enough spot for Gray. It's just when Gray goes bust, it's usually when we're, as a collective, the entire industry is jumping on board with him as a cheap option in a good-looking spot. That said, actually, if we're looking at the game log, one of the bad ones was against the Mets, who aren't terrible, it turns out. Bad one against the Cubs, who it turns out are terrible, but that was his first start of the year back on March 31st, and we didn't know they were terrible at that point. Still a lot of good, interesting hitters in that Cubs lineup, just underperforming. And then the other blow-up came against the Orioles. So it was actually decent in a handful of these starts. Like he had a good start at Coors Field going back to early May, 7 strikeouts at Coors Field over 6 innings. Gave up 8 hits, but only 1 run. Last time out against the Pods, just went 4 innings, 3 earned runs, 2 strikeouts, 2 walks. 5 innings at Baltimore again, gave up 8 earned on 9 hits. Struck out 1 walk, 1, 2 home runs allowed. Struck out just 3, walked 0, gave up no runs on 2 hits over 6 against Kansas City. Is that a good DFS day? If he does that for you on FanDuel at 73, are you happy with it? I guess we are. I mean, the win becomes kind of crucial, and he got it that day. So you got the win bonus and the quality start bonus. Just 3 strikeouts, but no runs, gave you the 6. I feel like you do obviously need Chris Sale to not run off and hide with his score. And then you need like Andrew Abbott to not have a killer day against Colorado at a much higher price, if we're talking about FanDuel for John Gray. So if he just goes out and gives you that start that he gave you 3 starts back against the Royals, which again, he only struck out 3. It's just that he pitched efficiently, didn't walk anybody, gave up just 2 hits, no runs. That's in play for a good start today. And with 4,200 of savings between him and Chris Sale, that buys you one of the best bats on the slate at 4,200. Oh, it falls just short of buying you Jose Ramirez. But it buys you Marcell Ozuna. Everybody else is cheaper. 7,000 on DK. I think he's clear cut, just, deservingly popular. As I said at the top of the show, I think DK is a lot more of a just a competition of who gets it right as far as who they paired with Chris Sale. Deservingly the top option. We're going to talk about him in just a second. If we're looking at Angels bats, if Anthony Rendon is in the leadoff spot, well, if he doesn't care, then I don't really care. 82 WRC plus over his 83 plate appearances. Dead min price on FanDuel, I guess, is at least somewhat interesting. But I feel like we've fallen for that before. He is low strikeout. He does put the ball in play quite a bit. The old version of Anthony Rendon is a player that I liked a lot. Used to hit for a lot of power, high average, good on base skills. He used to be a hell of a third baseman. Just completely limited by, as his own words, doesn't like playing baseball. We'll see whether he's in the lineup. If he's in the leadoff at 2,000 on FanDuel, 39 on DK even feels like a bad idea. But the dead min on FanDuel keeps him at least involved. Nolan Shanuel, 35-27, 8 home runs, pretty limited slash line, just an 88 WRC plus. Another low strikeout guy at the top of the lineup that could certainly challenge John Gray a little bit, but he's been really limited in terms of the results. Really low-end contact, should focus more on just being a put the ball in play, get to first base kind of a hitter. Taylor Ward for 4,400 for a guy with a 14.8% barrel rate, 44.5% hard hits, 14 home runs, a 181 ISO, 108 WRC plus over 367, and a believable enough track record for those to be realistic numbers. That's really cheap against this pitcher. As much as I might like John Gray for the money here, that is an exceedingly cheap price for Taylor Ward. 31 on FanDuel is honestly a little bit cheap as well. 8.17 in the home run model, realistic upside for him. Willie Calhoun, 28-26, cheap, effective enough, 269, 339 on the front end of the slash line. That's probably who they should have leading off. I don't really understand Willie Calhoun as a cleanup hitter, especially when you've got a couple of reasonable power bats in the lineup. Willie should be leading off. His skill set fits a leadoff role. Certainly more so than the two guys in the top two lineup spots. Logan O'Hoppe, very cheap, 4,300 for a catcher with a 47.4% hard hit rate, 10.2% barrels this year. The hard hits are up slightly by about a point. The barrels are way down this year, but it's resulted in 12 home runs, a 192 ISO, 123 WRC plus, strong slash line. He's been probably their best hitter this year. I don't really understand why he's quite as cheap as he is on DraftKings. 31 on FanDuel, where you don't have to play catchers, is kind of just fine in a lineup that I don't really want to stack all that much. But DraftKings, I could definitely see the upside. I think you could one-off Logan O'Hoppe in lineups where you don't play John Gray. Probably a decent idea there, given all the premium contact and fly ball trajectory that John Gray is going to allow. It's not a bad option. He won't be highly owned. Brendan Drury for 3,025. A lot of home runs in his past. None in his current. Doesn't look like many in his future. 4.79 home run in the home run model. Just 3,000 on DraftKings, 2,500. If you want to play the memory from the last couple seasons of him being an exceptionally good power hitter for cheap pricing in the middle infield that people seemed allergic to using for whatever reason, go for it. But we have not had that guy over 141 opportunities this year. Mickey Moniak is just probably bad at this point. 191, 240, 298. Not sure what more proof we need that this guy's not a major league capable player right now. Zach Neto's pretty good. 11 homers, 14 steals, just a 96 WRC plus, but effective enough. A 173 ISO, 2,800 on FanDuel at shortstop, 3,900 on DraftKings. There are certainly other shortstops you'd rather play more, but if you're stacking Angels, he's kind of a priority bat. And then Joe Adele just has a ton of power when he happens to connect with the ball, which is once every couple of weeks. 3,000 on DraftKings, 2,900 on FanDuel. Over 272. He's got 14 home runs, 10 stolen bases. A lot of those came in the first 150 plate appearances. 207 ISO and excellent premium contact numbers. 29.4% strikeouts. Ways up Mendoza, a 247 on base, just a 74 WRC plus. Pretty limited option at the bottom of the lineup. On the Rangers side, Semien, Seager, Smith, Garcia, Nathaniel Lowe, and Wyatt Langford, all appealing bats in the top 6. Everybody is priced down a little bit because the team collectively hasn't been quite as good. Some of these guys are kind of bouncing along. Marcus Semien, for example, at just 229, 295, 378. Made the All-Star game with those numbers, but that's kind of limited. 88 WRC plus, a 149 ISO, 12 home runs. Compared to what we know and love from Marcus Semien, that's a really limited slash line. $4,900 on DraftKings is cheap. I just buy the history. I buy the fact that not anything in his slash line. Remember everything we were saying about Francisco Lindor earlier this season, where everything looked exactly identical to what he's done over years past? That is the case with Marcus Semien. So I think if you've ever played Marcus Semien before, just throw him into a lineup today for cheaper. $3,400 on FanDuel. They haven't lowered it by that much, but that's certainly down from his, high points. Corey Seager's definitely down in price. $5,000 on DK. It's a somewhat high price, especially for this slate, but it's easy to reach given all the values on this board, and he should never be that cheap. 271, 352, 473 with a 202 ISO, a 127 WRC plus, 16 home runs this year. With a really weak start factored in there. 10.84 in the home run model, 15.9% barrels, 48.9% hard hits. We're down slightly in terms of the hard hit rate, but the barrels are actually slightly up. Certainly way up over 2 years ago, but up over last year. He's been a little bit off the mark, but certainly not as far as he's discounted. The average is way down, 271 compared to 327 last year. The on-base has lost like 40 points. It's where some of the WRC plus has gone. But for what we really, truly care about for DFS purposes, at least in a lot of ways for Corey Seager, is still very much intact. Josh Smith has just been good when he's in the lineup. He's been dealing with a little bit of a soreness issue. Just 4,000 third base and shortstop eligible on DK, 3,000 on FanDuel. Doesn't really reflect the quality this season. A 137 WRC plus, 292, 383, 446, giving you a really solid 829 OPS. Like the option quite a bit with multi-position eligibility for a cheap price if he's hitting third. Even if he's hitting 5-6, I think he's a very effective player. Adolis Garcia, 46-32, 16 home runs, a 199 ISO. You're getting your power output from him, but you're not getting a ton of consistency. You're limited in on base, which limits his steals, which limits his run creation value. Still hits the ball exceedingly hard. The strikeouts aren't really any different. The walks are definitely down. That's cost him in the on base and stolen bases department. But for $4,600, just buy the power upside. Against Davis Daniel, just buy the power upside. Even in his 2 good starts, he's given up some home runs. He's given up plenty of premium contact. Adolis Garcia can mash on the right day. Nathaniel Lowe for $37,000, $3,000. Very cheap for a guy with a 350 on base, a 110 WRC plus, over 277 pretty effective plate appearances, who we know has significant, not significantly more, but some more power upside, and definitely much more ability to drive the ball than we've seen from him this year. That ISO could be significantly higher by the end of the season. The home run total could be mid-teens-ish. I won't say he's going to hit more than 10 home runs the rest of the way, but I think 10 is on the board for him. We saw him hit 27 2 years ago. Wyatt Langford kind of quietly coming around, has done some exciting things. 4 home runs, 7 steals, up to a 105 WRC plus, slashing 270, 337, 398. 42.2% hard hits with a very good strikeout rate, effective enough walk rate. He's still very cheap, $39.29. Definitely a playable part against Davis Daniel. Jonah Heim, switch hitting catcher with a little bit of pop. 8.2% barrels, 40% hard hits. Not my favorite catcher on the board, but if you're building a ton of Ranger stacks, if you're building a ton of Rocky stacks, maybe you want him. If you're building a ton of Ranger stacks, he should be in there. Derek Hill, 27-25, 3 home runs, 2 steals, and just 39 plate appearances, a 243 ISO, 112 WRC plus, making pretty good contact in the small sample of batted ball events. In AAA this year, another guy who's at an advanced age. She's 28, but he's slashing 350, 415, 631 with a 154 WRC plus, a 280 ISO, 8 home runs and 7 stolen bases over 176 plate appearances in AAA, which is quite good. For his major league career, over 343 chances with Texas, Washington, and Detroit. He's at 230, 279, 334 with a 70 WRC plus, a 104 ISO, 28.6% strikeouts, 7 homers, and 12 stolen bases. A little minor amount of multi-category upside from Derek Hill, but probably not even this good. Leody Taveras, an up and down option, has the ability to drive the ball more in a line drive sense. Not really getting on or hitting for average this year. 5 home runs, 10 steals. A mix and match play at best at the bottom of the lineup. I'm going to say John Gray for value, just because it's masochistic. Followed by Rangers bats. Followed by Davis Daniel in the mid-range. And I really, really don't like those prices. I'd be much more enthusiastic if he was $1,000 cheaper and just in the mix with everybody else price-wise. It's absurd that he's higher priced than John Gray on the other side of this lineup. That's a perfect illustration of that. On both sites, you should just level those prices off. Take $1,000 off of Davis Daniel on both sites. He's right in the mix. At these prices, it doesn't fit as well. And our last game, 521. They said we couldn't chew up 2 hours for a 5-game slate, but they've clearly never watched this show before. Sale scratched? You're kidding me. That's a joke. You guys have to be kidding. Sale pushed to tomorrow. Okay, we officially don't have a good pitcher on this slate. Ah, boy. That's going to take a minute. What's the easiest way to do this? This is the 8. He's probably not even on here yet. Is he? Oh, they did. Damn, they're good. Bear with me one sec. We are updating as quickly as possible for Mr. Elder. If you're just tuning in, Chris Sale has been scratched. His start was bumped to tomorrow, so we'll just talk about him again tomorrow. Bryce Elder making his first start since June 26th in the show. He did make one start in AAA on July 2nd through 5 innings. So it doesn't look like there's actually a break in between. Just went down to AAA. Went 6 in his most recent major league start. 4 strikeouts, 2 earned, 4 hits against the Cards at St. Louis. It was effective enough. All right, let me see where. Yeah, 4. That's not going to be enough. Give him 6. He's just there. Yeah, I think that's about right. All right. All right, Bryce Elder. 8,000 on DK, 7,600 on FanDuel. As you can see, does not project out all that differently than a lot of these other crappy value options that we've talked about through this entire slate. He's not going to be here when we resort the board. So John Gray is now your most highly projected pitcher, followed very closely behind by Andrew Abbott on what is now, I think, the worst pitching slate of the year. And I use worst loosely because it's fun. You've got weird playable values in every possible corner. You've got some short starts in here. You've got a really, really strange mix of pitchers. But Elder drops all the way down here. Facing a quality enough Diamondbacks lineup, 8,000, 7,600, an awkward price fit compared to some of the others, like the highest projected pitcher, John Gray, who is cheaper on both sites. Elder has not been good in his limited outings this year in the show. 6 starts, 29 2/3, just a 17% strikeout rate, 5.76 ERA with a 4.36 xFIP. Limiting enough for power, but he's made some mistakes that have cost him a 2.96% home runs, which isn't bad, but it shows he's given up some home runs despite the strong launch angle trajectory there at 7 degrees, 8.1% barrels. So when he makes mistakes, they tend to be high trajectory and hard hit. Last year, it was similar. Fewer barrels in the larger sample, but gave up some hard hits and exit velo, and it was an 8.5 degree average launch, mid-range in terms of the home runs. He was just a more effective overall pitcher last year. Similar strikeout numbers, similar stuff in terms of CSW and swinging, though the swinging was almost a full point higher. A little bit of happenstance maybe just mixed in, but the xFIP at 4.50, a little bit higher. The ERA was better. So more effective in terms of results, but not necessarily because of anything that he was doing. Very limited pitcher. I'm more intrigued by Diamondbacks bats now, certainly. I think there's some upside there. We'll probably also... I have a feeling that this run line might have changed. It's not updated yet. Let's call it, Let's call it 8.5. And is it enough to swing it all the way? Probably not, but it's probably more like... something like that, maybe. Just like there's no actual science behind that. It's just guessing. I just wanted to give these guys a little bit more juice. You can see it doesn't have a major impact at that level. Actually, especially because I didn't actually move the runs over. Should have more impact than that. Give him a little bit more juice, but not crazy. But the Diamondbacks, we'll see where that actually settles in. That's just me making up what that might be. But I wanted to give it a little bit of a feed here. Gilbert Diaz to start with at 6,000 on DK, 6,500 on FanDuel. Is certainly playable. Came into the start of the show as playable, and with the tragic loss of Chris Sale midway through the show, or most of the way through the show, just gains ground because there's a whole abundance of shares now. It's going to be wild. It is total free-for-all now in where all those DraftKings shares might go. 6,000, he's got a solid enough projection to be very, very playable and a quality dart throw on the DraftKings slate, if nothing else. 6,500 on FanDuel, I think he's in play in the mix, especially if you're building a bunch of lineups. Assuming we're getting 5 or 6 innings out of him, and he's gone 6 and 5+ multiple times in the minor leagues so far this year. He, again, in his AAA starts, 4 starts, 22 innings, 30.8% strikeouts, but a 9.9% walk rate. In 54 innings and 11 starts in AA this year, 34.2% strikeouts, 12.9% walks. Last year, it was just 3 starts in AA, 15 innings, 25% strikeouts, 14% walks, but made 22 starts at high A, 33% strikeouts, 13% walks. So you can see some of the flaws are pretty apparent in terms of a very high walk rate at every one of those levels, but a strong strikeout rate in exchange. Against a Braves team that has a 26% strikeout rate for this projected version of the lineup, there's definitely appeal there for these cheap prices. It's just you got to fade a lot of power that's in this Braves lineup and a lot of high quality that's in this lineup, with up and down success so far this season. I can't believe he scratched. That's ridiculous. The Angels lineup is out. Rendon is, in fact, leading off. Rendon, Shanuel, Kevin Pillar hitting third. Kiston Hura in the lineup. Good pickup for them. Just yet another guy on this team who is a former top-end prospect. Never was type. They're just collecting these guys. But that's kind of interesting, having him hitting cleanup. Having him and Willie Calhoun on the same team is fascinating. This is like, in a lot of ways, these are a lot of guys that I had on my dynasty squad like a bunch of years ago that I ended up cutting and didn't really work out. Those two in particular. So it's here Kiston here hitting cleanup. Logan O'Hoppe is in the lineup hitting fifth. Drury, Moniak, Joe Adell, and Luis Guillorme, who is mostly here for defense. So we still don't have these lineups. But Gilbert Diaz overall is most likely going to face these, at least the top 8 hitters in this lineup from the Braves. Jared Kelenic has been entrenched in the leadoff role lately. He's slashing 272, 317, 455. He's got a 183 ISO, 115 WRC plus. Having a hell of a year. 10.7% barrels, 45% hard hits for a kid who was, one time there weren't many more highly regarded hitting prospects in his years in his prospect class. So it's been a bumpy ride, but maybe we're finally getting there with Jared Kelenic. Still just $4,000 on DraftKings, $3,100, very cheap on both sites for the quality that we've gotten out of him. Even if he's just this guy that we've gotten this year, I think those are cheap prices. Helps you average down the pricing for Ozzy Albies in the second spot. He's been scuffling along. 264, 319, 419, just a 155 ISO. He has created runs 7% better than average. The contact's been off the mark a little bit. The power's certainly been off the mark a little bit. But Ozzy could come surging back to life. And he's very low strikeout, low walk, a lot of balls in play. Austin Riley also underperformed the first half of the season, or the first 3/4 of the first half anyway, and then surged recently. He's up to 11 home runs, a 189 ISO, 115 WRC+, making fantastic contact. Contact is actually up from last year. 14.7% barrels, 51.2% hard hits. Guys hit 30-plus home runs each of the last 3 years. Definitely a ton of upside for the money. Matt Olson for $5,000, $3,300. We talked about him way back at the beginning of the show. Love the power upside. 13 home runs, a 187 ISO is a little bit limited power output-wise, over 368 for him. The barrels are down. The hard hits are down. He's striking out a little bit more. He's walking a little bit less. It's a rough season for Olson so far, but that's why he costs $5,000, $3,300. Still has immense any given slate upside. Against a kid making his major league debut, it's a monster opportunity for Matt Olson. 11. Oh, it came down to 11.10 when I changed the Vegas line. So you lost 100th of a point. He's no longer at that 11-11. So take the numerology away. The gods don't love it anymore. Ozuna for $57.41 continues to be their best player. 271 ISO, 23 home runs, creating runs 62% better than average. Monster contact. Sean Murphy is a quality catcher. If it's Travis d'Arnaud, just as good. A lot of power in both of those bats from the right side. I expect it's going to be Murphy, but either way, I'm honestly fine with it. The prices are probably pretty close at this point. Adam Duvall, a lot of premium contact and right-handed power, but otherwise pretty limited. Very cheap. He's a playable mix and match option late in this lineup. Orlando Arcia has been pretty bad this year. The hard hits are actually slightly up, but the barrels are down. The output is way down. Just a 57 WRC+. Been a part of the problem. Last year he was a great cog in the machine. Turned the lineup over consistently. Hit 17 home runs. This year we've seen none of that, but the hard hits are at least slightly encouraging if we're chasing. And then Eli White, deadman on both sites. Minor effectiveness. He's got a home run on the board in his 11 plate appearances. Been around for a minute. Was with, was it Houston? I know we looked at him the other day. But again, just because he's at the dead man. 220 plate appearances in 2021 with Texas. That's what it was. Texas, not Houston. Hit 6 home runs and stole 4 bases. Sub Mendoza, 259 on base. The year after, exactly at the Mendoza line, over 117. Hit 3 home runs, stole 12 bases with just a 274 on base percentage. Really limited hitter. Guy that it kind of makes sense that he's at the dead min. But if you catch him on the right day, on a very weird, limited, bumpy kind of a slate, who the hell knows? The Diamondbacks lineup. Corbin Carroll finally found his third home run of the season. He's got 15 steals, just a 108 ISO, a 78 WRC+. Gradually ticking in the right direction from time to time for a couple of weeks, then backslides, then gradually it's 1 step forward, 3 steps back kind of a thing. Ketel Marte, 53-36, continuing his strong season, a 222 ISO, creating runs 36% better than average, a monster 53.7% hard hit rate from a guy who strikes out less than 20% of the time at second base. Dynamite option, just 53 on DraftKings. Not just, but 53, an affordable price on DraftKings. 36, same thing on FanDuel. Jock, 4,700, 3,300. Might get Jock now. I wasn't going to be in the lineup against Chris Sale, more likely than not, but probably going to get him against the righty. Tons of power upside from Jock. 13 home runs, 234 ISO. Primarily a platoon option. Tons of premium contact over time against a limited right-handed pitcher. Could make Jock a little bit sneaky because a lot of shows earlier in the day, a lot of projection systems earlier in the day wouldn't have had him. Everybody's going to catch up to it, but might go under-owned as compared to like if this had just been the starting situation today. Christian Walker apparently didn't make the All-Star team despite his 22 home runs, 245 ISO, 137 WRC+, a very strong slash line, tremendous amount of premium contact. It's a fantastic option, 52-37. He's appropriately priced, if not a couple $100 cheap on DraftKings. Lourdes Gurriel is cheap, $4,200, $3,000. For his any given slate upside, those are low prices, particularly DraftKings. That's way low. 40.1% hard hits this year. It's down from last year's 46, down from the year before as well. So are the barrels. He's striking out a little bit more, but it's still sub 20%. He doesn't really draw walks, so he's putting the ball in play consistently. He's slashing 269, 300, 436. We could use some more on base out of him, but he's creating runs 6% better than average. He's hit 13 home runs. He should be a few hundred higher. Doesn't have to be like 5,000 plus, but he's deserving of a couple $100 higher. Gabriel Moreno for 35.28, getting on at a 332 clip now. He's improved. 104 WRC plus. This is coming around. I hadn't really noticed it, but the average is ticked up. The on base is improving. The runs are above average now. Just 4 home runs, just mediocre contact so far. But a quality bat who doesn't strike out, who does draw walks, playable enough at catcher. Genio Suarez, Alec Thomas, Geraldo Perdomo at the bottom. Very, very much mix and match options. Perdomo is probably my favorite option down there, given a little bit of ability to get on base, correlate, wrap back around to the top of the lineup. But he's not all that appealing even for that. Alec Thomas probably has, I don't want to say the best power with a guy like Genio Suarez and his history sitting there. But Suarez has been really bad this year. Just a 129 ISO, 7 home runs, over 339 plate appearances with his contact disappearing. Not that Thomas's 31 plate appearances are any kind of convincing element there. 402 last year. He hit 9 home runs, stole 9 bases, had a 144 ISO. Call it a tie between these two as pretty limited options at different positions. So it's a thin bottom 3, but a pretty strong top 6 for Arizona against a much more gettable pitcher now. So it has become Braves bats, Diamondbacks bats, Gilbert Diaz, and then if you want Bryce Elder, he's there at a not all that effective price. Fun slate, gang. 9.5. Damn, I underestimated. What's the actual... I was off on that. I'm usually better at that. I did initially hit 9, but then I unwound it. Pinnacle's got it at 9. Let me go there. I think 9 is more correct. Mine is 124, 115. I was close on that part. So a little bit more juice. Up now he's the other way. 100th of a point gained in the home run model for Matt Olson in that. Now you do get the 13.13 double bad luck for Marcell Ozuna. This is getting silly. It's still Braves bats up top, Diamondbacks bats following close behind, then Gilbert Diaz, and then and only then a not overly appealing Bryce Elder from the bottom spot on the board. I prefer Ryan Feltner to Bryce Elder. Got to be said. Much more strikeout upside, apparently, which is weird. Terrible ballpark. I don't expect him to succeed, but with a gigantic gulf between those prices, Feltner definitely more appealing there. And I tell you what, he's probably more appealing than Chris Flexen for 1,000 more against a much better Twins team. For 4,000, it's a more interesting conversation around Cater Montero. Save another 1,500 and go to Montero. It's just a very limiting factor in the power that he's given up, the power that the Guardians are drawing against him, and their low strikeout nature, high scoring nature in general. So I don't love this option, but especially now that there's no Chris Sale and you're just paying for whatever, it's a free square. Free square, interesting value dart. Not really all that appealing, not really all that appealing for these two. Limited in terms of innings, and kind of more in the mix with these two guys than he is with the more interesting values. Interesting value dart for Gilbert Diaz, considering the high strikeout nature of that Braves team and the potential quality that he's got. More realistic now at 82, 8,000 because we don't have Chris Sale to have to pay for. I still think he's mispriced. I still am not really drawn to him there, but there's some opportunity to succeed, and the misprice is not as egregious as it was, just because you can use him, as unfortunately as a higher end option now. Weird slate. Gav, I think we're just limited to 5 innings, which makes him a little bit of a weird fit at 85 on DraftKings and a weird fit against the quality start bonus on FanDuel. But again, losing Chris Sale, puts everything back into the mix a little bit. So even 5 innings out of Gav, if he's got his stuff working against a fairly high strikeout Tigers team, it's on the board. Andrew Abbott becomes a lot more appealing as one of the more realistically high-end pitchers on the slate and in a fantastic matchup against the terrible Rockies. That said, I think the Rockies are kind of interesting as a value angle into the slate. It's just I no longer need to use them to pay for Chris Sale. So what's the point? There's just nothing to pair them with, right? You're just like, all right, I can go from Colorado bats. I can go to Colorado bats and then pair them with, I already have the Guardians high-end bats. I was already paying for the most expensive other bats. I could pivot to the Braves, but it becomes a moot point where the value is in terms of some of that because of that disappearance of Sale in terms of the Colorado bats. I still think there's a lane for them to succeed based on everything we talked about. And you could use them to succeed on a slate for sure, but it's no longer that direct path to Chris Sale shares. John Gray at the top of the board now. Weird slate. 73, 7,000. One of the least expensive pitchers, has the strongest projection in a very high quality matchup. He's been lower strikeout this year. He's been less reliable overall this year, but he is definitely playable. Here's your home run board. Updated for the new pitching matchups. Let's make sure we get everybody in there. That's it, gang. A lot of Cleveland up toward the top of the board in terms of power upside. That was my Noel play. He's not in the lineup. But you can see you've got David Fry, the two obvious guys up here. And then less power upside for those other guys because they're not as big home run hitters in that Cleveland lineup. But there's some quality there for sure. The Braves are showing their usual complement of power. The Rockies, again, showing a little bit of interesting power from some of those. Ryan McMahon, lefty. But you get Talia as an appealing righty. You get Tovar down here. You get Hunter Goodman right there. Corey Seager's on the board. It's a weird slate. It's certainly one where you can, limit your stack sizes and bolt on some parts around it. Given all the pitching value, you're going to be able to pay up to whatever back combinations you want. So if you're looking like 3-3-2 on FanDuel or 3-3 on DK, and just mixing and matching the rest of your way there, or 5 with 3 one-offs that are very high-priced bats instead of a secondary stack is more in play than I would usually say it is. Trust the magic left hand. Pitching sucks. Yes, it does. I think that's going to be it, gang. Got to get some projections updated on the website now, certainly. Pitching projections will be updated. Hitting projections will be updated in the next little bit. Got a little bit less than an hour till lock now. Chewed up a lot of time talking about 5 games, but we had a whole hell of a lot to talk about. Greg, Joker actually doesn't mind fireworks. We actually walked down the block to the park that overlooks the Hudson and saw a pretty spectacular little fireworks display with 15,000 other people that were there. But yeah, he was in his glory. He thinks he's the mayor of this town. He loves walking around meeting people, so he was saying hi to everybody, and the fireworks didn't faze him one bit. But I know it is a big problem with a lot of dogs, so I'm happy for that. Makes it easy. He's just a good boy. He has never given me any kind of problems whatsoever. Great dog. Yeah, it was a cool display. I got some good shots of it. Had I found a good position and staked out and had a camera instead of an iPhone, I would have gotten some spectacular shots. But even with the iPhone and being jostled and having trees and shit in the way, still got some pretty good ones. So it was a fun time. But with that, guys, let me say goodnight and get out of here. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. We'll get everything updated, and we will see you tomorrow for hopefully a better slate, a bigger slate, a more interesting, probably less interesting slate, honestly, but maybe a little bit more of a rational kind of a slate. I'll see you tomorrow.